Almost 3 decades of wondering what happened to Jacob Wetterling. A brutal and public kidnapping opens investigators' eyes to a string of attacks in mid-Minnesota. Episode 67 of Crime Over Wine starts right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week, my guest co-host is a wine guru, y'all, and you are in for a treat. She is the owner of Amada Tapas and Wine in beautiful downtown Chattanooga. My guest co-host this week is Amanda Trotter. Hello, Amanda. How are you?
Hello. I'm so happy to be on this podcast, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. And so everyone remembers Amanda, right, from a couple weeks ago. We did our live show at Amada Tapas. We talked about the Jamie Faith case. And so Amanda's back. And I think we were even talking about, like, between the 2 live shows we did at Amada Tapas and now this episode, I think that you might hold the record for most amount of appearances on Crime Over Wine, Amanda. So congratulations.
Oh my gosh, I know. I need a Crime Over Wine jacket, like
yes.
how they give the
yes.
5-timers club on SNL. Like, I'm a 3-timer.
You're gonna have to come back 2 more times for that, Amanda. We don't just give away those jackets for nothing. So
I gotta earn it.
You're right, you gotta earn it. But Amanda, so we got along great on our first 2 shows. Or I think I got a lot of comments that like our chemistry was like really, really good. And so I'm really excited to have you back this week.
I love that.
But mostly because you know your way around a bottle of wine. And so I let you pick out our wine of the week. And so I'm gonna go ahead and toss it over to you and let you intro for the people.
Yeah, so we are drinking a bottle of wine that is called Amanda. It felt fitting.
I wonder why.
As you can imagine. So this wine the varietal is like a form of Garnacha. Very, very similar grape to Pinot Noir. And yeah, this wine is amazing. The winemaker named it after his daughter, Amanda. And in Spanish, which is the name of our restaurant, Amada, it means lovable woman. So, it's very on brand for our restaurant as well. So this is a 2020. It is completely, so the fruit's completely destemmed and does not undergo any maceration on the skins. So it is a rosé, and in Spain they call that Rosado, but same thing. The aging process is completed in stainless steel and French oak. It's got a really, really cool taste on the back end. And this style of rosé means teardrop pink in Spanish. And yeah, it's a really, really good one. Big fan of this, not only because it's my name, but I use this wine to gift to people sometimes. It's almost like a form of merch for me.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so you're trying to get the bottle open?
It's really in there, y'all. Like, I'm struggling.
So you can't see, but this bottle has a pink wax on top of the cork. And it is like, for some reason, the cork that they use, it is actually really, really hard to get this bottle open.
I think I need to do like a whole like mini series for this podcast on like me trying to open up these different bottles of
Are you having to muscle it out?
Yeah. Finally, Jesus. Sorry.
If I had a video of me every time I open a bottle of wine, like, I would be so embarrassed for anyone to see that.
Love that. Okay, well, now that I have this freaking wax off, like, gosh, like, I feel like an amateur right now, not being able to get this open.
No, that's
I'm
not
gonna
on
go ahead
you.
and pour my glass. Love that sound. Ooh, it's like a very dark, very, very dark rosé.
Yes,
Ooh,
it's so
okay.
cool. I think, like, because of the Garnacha, like, they're really, really picky about the farming practices here and, like, just being biodynamic, and they stay within the parameters of just trying to keep this. This is technically classified as an organic wine.
Okay.
And I think it's really, really cool. It honestly, it drinks like a red, does it not?
Yeah, no, it does. It's smooth like a red for sure. But it's still there's almost like a little bit of like carbonation.
Yeah, that's called effervescent. And effervescence. And it does have like just a spritz to it.
Yeah, just a spritz.
Yeah. This
I
guy
really like
that made
one.
this wine, he's from Basque Country. And in that area, Chocolate is one of the big winemaking towns, and they're just like world-class winemakers over there, and they're known for having that like little spritz, the effervescent. And it's like one of those things like you want that when you're eating fish, and this is like a fisherman's town. And yeah, so it's delightful. And honestly, this kind of stuff that's like super different like this, so good with funky cheeses like a camembert or blue cheese. Yeah.
This could be great with a charcuterie board.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I really like this wine, Amanda. I'm sitting here, I'm like, do we have to talk about the crime?
Yeah, yes, let's talk about the crime. Let's do it. We're just geeking out over this wine, though.
And for it, we need to bring you back on once a month to give us like your incredible wine recommendations and teach us a little bit here, because I feel like you probably have a whole lot of knowledge up there that I'd never even considered before. So anytime you want to come back, please let us know.
I appreciate that. You know, I'm still very new to the wine world. I'm like 2 years into being a wine snob. I haven't always been this knowledgeable, and I'm really specifically knowledgeable about Spanish wine because that's my brand. But as far as like other regions of the world and stuff, still totally learning. And it's that's one of those things about wine. You're always learning.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of learning, so you're the wine expert. I'm the crime expert as far as I'm aware. So you want to transition to this because, Amanda, I probably have one of the most like intense, like deep, dark kind of cases that we've ever probably talked about in Crime Over Wine.
Oh, wow.
There's like a massive world that I feel like that we are about to uncover and kind of dive into, that most of us probably are like imagining or trying to imagine like doesn't even exist. And so you ready for this one? Because I think you're going to speak. Good thing we have a really good bottle of wine handy because you're going to need it. I think you're going to drink the whole thing. After hearing what I have to say this week. So this week, I want to tell you about a young boy whose youth and innocence was stolen from him at a critical age. And when decades go by with no leads to find the person responsible, a surprising confession exposes a majorly flawed investigation. This week, I want to tell you about Jacob Wetterling and the monster in Minnesota. 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling was a good kid. He grew up in St. Joseph, Minnesota, just northwest of Minneapolis. He lived with his parents and his two younger siblings. And the night of October 22nd, 1989, Jacob's parents were out at a dinner party and called in a sitter to watch the kids for the night. But right after dark, Jacob, his friend, and his 10-year-old little brother decided to grab some flashlights and take their bites and make the short ride to a local convenience store to rent a video and to buy some candy for the night. And the sitter was like, sure, go ahead. Get out of my hair, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. And that's what they did. They got their video and their candy and were riding back, whipping through the night on their bikes about a half mile from Jacob's house when suddenly, out of the shadows, a man approached them, coming from a car that was parked on the side of the road. The man was wearing a mask and dark-colored clothing, and he asked the boys how old they were, and they told him. Then he told Jacob's friend and his brother to turn off their flashlights and to get into a ditch off the side of the road. And the idea of it just seems like odd, like so ridiculous, right? That Jacob's friend thought it was a joke, frankly, and started to laugh. And when the boys didn't immediately do what the man said, he threw the boys' bikes into the ditch, grabbed Jacob, and told the boys to run away and not look back, or else he would find them and shoot them.
Oh, God. Okay, so as far as, since I'm in the Third Timers Club, I can already tell this is the darkest one we've done yet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we talked about Julie Lynn Turner, who was clearly messed up in the head for the first show we did. And then we talked about Jamie Faith, who was just like a weird, love triangle situation going on. This is the first case that I've talked to you about, Amanda, that involved a child.
Yeah.
And like the details are just haunting as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so
and,
disclaimer then.
Yeah, a little bit of a disclaimer, definitely. Again, I know a lot of my listeners are really sensitive about, about cases involving children. Here's your warning, right?
Okay.
Like maybe skip this episode.
Yeah, no, I'm buckled up.
Yeah. Well, the boys ran home to the Wetterlings' house and told their babysitter what had just happened. Completely shocked, she called her father, who came over to the house, called Jacob's parents, and then called 911. Police were there within minutes, too, and immediately started a wide-scale search based on the description Jacob's friend and brother were able to give them about this masked man, like the little details they had. They didn't have much to share about him, but they gave police what they could. By the next day, the FBI had joined in on the investigation already, and the story of the young boy who was snatched by the masked man just a half-mile from his house during such an innocent activity as a bike ride had spread throughout the region. Investigators were just inundated with tips right away, and the FBI quickly stepped up the search to include aerial and ground searches too. It turned into one of the largest searches in Minnesota history. Less than a week after Jacob went missing, the FBI had assigned, get this, 20 different agents to his case, and the governor had also activated the National Guard to search a 700 square mile area for Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's parents, through their pain, had said that they were going to seek as much publicity for Jacob as possible, speaking to as many media as would listen to them. And just a little while after the search began, police found their first clue. It was a tire track and 2 sets of shoe prints along a driveway right next to the road where Jacob was taken by that man. And the shoe prints looked to be from an adult and possibly another set that looked like it was from a child.
Oh, wow. So at this point, like, the kids that ran away were able to get at least the first part of the clues to the police.
Yeah. Right. And it was dark, right? So like, let's keep that in mind. Like it was, and like the adrenaline's running, they're young, they don't really know what to look for. Like they don't really know what was going on. They had no idea that they were in danger. And so like they really, and the guy was wearing a mask. Like they really only had like, roughly how tall he was. Like if it, as well as like an 11-year-old could describe to you, like everyone looks like they're like, 100 feet tall and 80 years old when you're 11.
That's such an interesting perspective as far as like when children are your witness.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and also I know, like, because I've watched a ton of true crime, as we both have, I definitely think that there's a little bit of like, sometimes kids say the damnedest things and you don't know if like if what they're saying is true or if it's like a completely accurate statement.
Right. Well, and to investigators' credit too, like a lot, like in this case, like a lot of times in other cases, investigators show up to the scene and encounter exactly what you're saying, and are just like, I don't know what to believe, I don't know what to do, and so therefore don't really take it all that seriously from the jump. And we've seen that over and over and over again in Crime Over Wine. To these guys' credits, guys and girls' credits, they like they took it seriously right away. Like they immediately started searching for Jacob because like they had there was enough there to like make that believable. So yeah, I mean, but I could see where you're coming from with like like what do you really know is true when you're dealing with a 10-year-old and 11-year-old. Yeah. Well, the neighbor who owns the driveway where the tracks were found was indeed questioned and denied any involvement in Jacob's disappearance, but investigators were initially really skeptical that the tracks were found at his house. So they stayed on him, and I mean like for years, Amanda, searched his property even, but ended up finding absolutely nothing there.
Oh, wow. And this, I don't know anything yet because I have not read the script, but it does seem like that would be such a hard spot to be in as far as like just the neighbor and that's it. It's like I'm sure that to have police searching your property for that long period of time would just be so frustrating.
Well, and of all things, the abduction of a child. It's like,
right? No one wants to be tied into this. Everybody was like, it's terrifying.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah. And, but in the days after Jacob's disappearance, hundreds of calls continued to come in promising information about what may have happened to Jacob. More than 500 people, too, came to a prayer vigil at a local church, and the FBI starts to paint a picture of who they believe is the man behind the mask here. An FBI profiler says they are sure Jacob's abductor is a sex offender previously, and that he likely has already left the area. The profiler describes the abductor as someone who is likely a loner, possibly with a physical deformity of some kind, and has likely committed a similar crime in the past. And on October 25th, just 3 days after Jacob was kidnapped, the local sheriff who is leading the investigation from a local level suggests that Jacob could already be dead.
Oh, this is like sickening. I am taking a sip of my wine.
I need that very much so. Well, and it's kind of like odd to me too that like I don't really know where this like thought process came from of like that he may be dead. Like I have a lot of questions there because it's like why why I just don't really understand like where that presumption came from because I didn't really see anything like sure he hasn't been seen but like I didn't really see anything that like led them to like usually like there's blood there's something that like lets people but like make this kind of assumption but that doesn't really seem to be here from what I can tell.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just kind of weird. And like, again, it makes it even weirder, I think, anyways, a little bit later on. So definitely hold that thought. But, the community had, already rallied around the Wetterlings. Local business leaders pooled funds together to offer a $100,000 reward for Jacob's safe return. An estimated 1 million flyers had been sent to local hospitals, truck stops, and social agencies around the country as word about his disappearance had spread nationally at this point. All throughout this process, law enforcement are fighting off rumor after rumor about why Jacob may have gone missing, who may be involved, and even some rumors that suggest that Jacob was found safe already and, and that he was totally fine, that the search was off, which, to be clear, obviously was not true. The FBI puts out multiple composite sketches based on Jacob's friend and his brother's description of the man they encountered that night, plus an additional sketch of a man who was seen in the convenience store right before Jacob was kidnapped. But all the while, police didn't seem to be getting any closer to finding Jacob or the person responsible for taking him and doing God knows what to him. That was until December of 1989, just about 2 months after Jacob's disappearance, when a second young boy comes forward with a shocking story that puts the whole town on edge. Crime Over Wine is sponsored by BetterHelp. As someone who's used therapy for years, I know that finding a therapist can sometimes be a stress on its own, juggling your full-time job, your family, your friends, your podcast, and trying to find the right therapist on top of that can almost feel impossible. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist that works for you on your terms. It's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to one of 33,000 licensed professional therapists in as little as a few days. And because finding a new therapist is a lot like finding a new bottle of wine, if you don't jive with your therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/crimeoverwine. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/crimeoverwine for 10% off your first month. Join over 4 million people who decided to get help and get happy with BetterHelp. The young boy's name was Jared Shirel. He was 12 years old from Cold Spring, Minnesota, just about 15 minutes southwest of St. Joseph, where Jacob lived. This is what he tells police. He says that in January of 1989, so just 9 months before Jacob's kidnapping, he was walking back home from a cafe when a masked man approached him, then grabbed him and threw him into the back of his car and drove to a remote location and sexually assaulted him. Afterwards, the man dropped Jared back off where he took him from originally and told him to run away and to not look back or else he would shoot him, just like what, Jacob's friend and his brother said that man said to them. For months, he kept this horrible attack to himself until months later when the news about what had happened to Jacob spread, and he just felt like the similarities were just too close to keep what had happened to him to himself for one single extra day.
Wow. So now we have, I guess this would be a third witness. And did you say the age of this kid?
Yeah, he's 12.
Okay.
Yeah, so he's only a year older than Jacob.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm assuming we're about to get a better sketch of the possible suspect then.
Yeah, kind of. And I can show you the sketches. It's kind of, in fact, let's do that because I think that actually it could be potentially interesting. So this is what we're talking about. Here's the thing. I'm like, look, this is how I feel about sketches, right? Like, they always look like the most, like, everyday man possible.
Seriously,
like, that's how I feel about
yeah.
it. Yeah, they all kind of, like, they all have this similar facial structure. So, like, sure, but they have three totally different hairstyles. I mean, kind of. I mean, they all have, very receding hairlines. So they have that. So, like, they look, I guess, similar enough, but...
One of them is Definitely more fit and attractive than like the other two.
Yeah.
The other two look more, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and this is like a composite, to be clear, like a composite of the other two, the third one that we're talking about, all the way on the right. But yeah, I mean, he has receding hairline. He looks like he's like 50, 60, something like that. He's like, has this like very square looking like features, bigger ears, a very like prominent nose, that kind of thing. So, but there's nothing really that I'm like, I don't know. I guess maybe unless I like know that guy, you know what I mean? And then like maybe I'm like, oh, like that looks like that dude. But like I don't really feel like that stands out to me in any way.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Not at all.
We're gonna link to this on our website, so that way you guys can see it for yourself. And now that that I showed you this, we're gonna bring it back, I think, a little bit later on. So definitely like freeze this in your brain, Amanda, because we're gonna talk about this a little bit later on.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Well, so Jared described to police like everything that he could about the man and his car in detail, and police are convinced that Jared's attack and Jacob's abduction are likely related somehow. And after they collect this information, another law enforcement agency decides that what they're hearing about what happened to Jared and what may have happened to Jacob are just too similar to cases that they are already investigating. The police chief in Painesville, Minnesota, which is just about 30 minutes southwest of St. Joseph, calls investigators to say that he thinks his investigation into a string of child sexual assaults may be related to the cases that they're working on. By January of 1990, 8 young boys had reported being picked up and sexually assaulted in Painesville. The similarities were eerie, Amanda. They were all out walking to wherever when a man approached them in a mask, grabbed them, shoved them into his car, drove them to a separate location, and attacked them. They were investigating the cases thoroughly, and they hadn't made an arrest just yet, but they did tell investigators that they had a pretty darn good suspect. And the police chief told them that he thought this man should be a suspect in Jacob and Jared's cases too.
Okay, so who was this guy? Is it the convenience store? The person that they saw at the convenience store?
Well, that's actually not totally clear, Amanda. So,
okay.
but that's fair point. But definitely hold that because you're onto something there, I think, for sure. But the man's name that they're talking about anyway is Danny Heinrich. He lived in Painesville at the time with his dad, and by January of 1990, police had actually already interviewed Danny, but he denied any involvement in Jacob's case, and they didn't have anything more solid on him, so they just let him go. But now that his name had come up again, police interviewed Danny a second time. Again, he denies any involvement and says he was likely at home in Painesville the day that Jacob was abducted, not in St. Joseph, and he actually even cooperates in all of police's questioning, and he even agrees to give them a sample of his hair, his shoes, and his car for evaluation. Police also execute a search warrant on his home. They collect police scanners, a case, a list of scanner frequencies, a pair of boots, some clothing, and a trunk containing photos of children, some with towels wrapped around them and others who were wearing only their underwear.
Oh, wow. So this guy's name's being brought up. Why?
So hold that thought. We're going to get there for sure. So, but the reason we're talking about it right now is because the Painesville Police Department had identified him as a suspect in their child abductions. So when they started hearing about what all has been happening in St. Joseph and in Cold Spring, Minnesota, they were like, this sounds way too familiar. And they're like, we haven't been able to prove it against this guy, but like maybe you can. And so they just like gave them the information that they had, so that way they could like all work together at this point.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. But like, I'm not 100% clear. Really? I kind of get a good hint toward the end, and we're going to get there a little bit later on, but like how Danny ended up on police's radar to begin with, and like specifically in St. Joseph, because in related to Jacob's case, because if you remember, I had just said that by the time that Painesville police had called them about Danny, Danny had already been questioned by police. So that's not totally clear to me. It's kind of a little odd, but so we're going to get to that a little bit later on. So definitely hold that thought. But I do want to show you something, Amanda, though. Okay. So let me show you a picture of Danny.
Ooh, yeah, he kind of looks like the first sketch, the one on the left.
Right. So let's show you that again. like, definitely, like, nothing like these two at all. Like, nothing like the two on the right here.
No, yeah, the guy on the left, for sure.
But the guy on the left, for sure, like, the similarities are very striking. Like, the receding hairline, the nose, the shape of the face, like, everything is kind of aligning here pretty well. So, again, we're going to link to all this on our website. Go check it out for yourself if you want to, but that's where we're at the moment. Well, just a few days after the questioning, Amanda, investigators get Jared to sit in the back seat of Danny's car to see if it's the same car where he was abducted a few months prior. He sits in the back seat, and Jared says that on a scale of 1 to 10, he is an 8 or maybe even a 9, that this is the same car that he was thrown into when he was abducted and assaulted. Police compare the tires on Danny's car to the tracks found near the scene of Jacob's abduction and found that they were consistent with the tracks, but not an exact match. They also later say that the shoe print collected from the scene was inconclusive, but it did correspond to Danny's right shoe. But police also find a fiber in Danny's car that matched the same fibers from Jared's clothes that he was wearing that night. And so police are confident enough at this point to bring Danny in. They arrest him and charge him with Jared's assault, but to be sure, they put Danny in a lineup to get Jared to pick him out. The same lineup that I showed you, Amanda. And when the lineup comes out, Jared does not identify Danny as his attacker.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think that Danny is the guy. I don't know why. I just don't feel that. I don't feel that he's the one that did it.
For what gives you that feeling?
I don't know. I guess well, obviously I just saw a picture of him. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I guess I have an idea in my head of the person that did this, and it didn't look like that guy. And so that's just like, I know that's a silly theory, but that's it. So,
yeah.
So what does that mean? What happens after that?
Well, yeah. So Danny's charges are dropped, Amanda, and he's released. And so not only do they not have enough to charge him with Jared's attack, but they definitely don't have enough to tie him to Jacob's disappearance either. And so he's just gone.
I see. So he's released, and we don't know yet, like, where he goes, but does he just, does he fall off the face of the earth, like, now that he's a free man?
Kinda, Amanda.
Yeah.
Like,
is he gone from this story? Like, we won't hear about Danny again?
Okay.
Can't
answer that question right now, Amanda, but hold that thought. Well, despite this loss, police continued to investigate Jacob's disappearance very thoroughly, and they actually continued to investigate that neighbor who owned the property where the tracks were found, and they clearly liked him as their guy. They searched his property, again, multiple times, but still just did not find anything significant, and to be clear, again, spoiler alert a little bit here, but this guy was never charged, and so we're not going to name him publicly for that reason.
Okay. So at this point, they're kind of back to square one.
Square one here, baby. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and they really just don't have anything solid. Like, I felt like they were getting, like, the closest they could get to Danny, and, like, now that's kind of over. But, meanwhile, again, we haven't even talked about Jacob's parents. Let's talk about that, because they are just absolutely heartbroken, obviously. Every day felt like they were getting further and further away from finding Jacob for sure. Not long after his disappearance, they founded the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, which is focused on the prevention of child abductions, and later it turned into a national database assistance program to help families of missing children. On February 17th, 1990, which would have been Jacob's 12th birthday, 200 people gathered for a memorial to honor him, and his parents ended up raising about $200,000 for the foundation. But all the money in the world couldn't have brought Jacob's parents any sort of peace. And they lived with that same feeling of hopelessness, despair, and sadness every day for years, which turned to almost 2 decades, Amanda, with no significant updates in Jacob's case. Until 2008, when someone comes forward with a surprising admission that may kick this investigation into high gear all over again. Get ready for that big test with Study.com. Study.com offers learning materials and test prep, even LSAT study prep guides for all of my legal nerds listening. Unfortunately, there aren't any wine study guides, and believe me, I did check. Listeners can get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level using the promo code CrimeOverWine. Again, that's promo code CrimeOverWine, no spaces, for 30% off your first 3 months at Study.com. Learn faster, stay motivated, study smarter with our sponsor, Study.com.
Okay, so we are back from a quick little break, and we're about to talk about some wine.
Yes, let's do it.
This is my time to shine.
Yes, tossing the mic right over to Amanda.
Yes. So, Liam, how many, have you had a full glass yet?
No, I'm maybe halfway through this one.
You talk more than I do, so I get to listen, and so I'm
not the first time I've heard that, by the way.
Well, on the show, I don't know about in life.
Well,
but
you would
I
be
get to,
right both ways. But
the fun part about being a guest on this show in particular is I really am listening just like the listeners are to the story for the first time, and so I'm just sipping. It's a great time being a guest.
Yeah. You got that. You got made in the shade for sure. Yeah.
So we're gonna do a little ASMR wine pouring.
Yes.
A little.
Yes.
So deductive wine tasting. So, deductive wine tasting means to start with the senses, and we're going to go through one of those, kind of how this tastes before I even try it. So you start with the color, and that is what is really, really cool about this wine. It is not based off of how, what do you think when you look at this? What's your first thought? If you've never tasted it, what are you thinking right now?
Okay, it's giving me a little bit more of a bolder rosé, right? Flavorful.
So you would guess that this is a rosé based off of because it's clear.
I don't know if I would guess
I know,
that.
because that's the thing about this wine. I would definitely think we are drinking... I would think we are drinking a blend. That's the thing. This is not a blend. I would think that it's a white grape and a red grape blend, and which is a rosé. And that's kind of that's what I would think when I look at this. That it's absolutely got some.
Well, and it's cool too, because it's almost typically with a rosé, it's you can see right through it, right, which is kind of cool. But this is it's foggy almost.
Yeah, this is I feel what I would call a ruby gemstone kind of look. And it definitely is giving sparkling in some way. You can almost tell that this is gonna have effervescence with the taste. And then on the smell, tell me what you get when you first smell it.
Strawberry?
I get strawberry. I definitely smell... Now, this is a really, really weird descriptor, and some people are put off by this one, but I get a little bit of a barnyard. And, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of, actually.
It's a wine tasting note, truly. But, and that's because of the practices that they've used. So this has been aged in stainless steel and French oak, and it's an organic wine, and they don't even add sulfur to this wine. I mean, no additives whatsoever. And so sometimes with organic wines, you'll kind of get that barnyard smell.
Yeah. That's fair.
And then,
but I don't really get that kind of earthy kind of flavor that I usually get when I usually consider when I think about organic wines. That's not you don't get the negative connotations that come with that kind of that kind
this
of,
is one of those
wine
wines with a deductive tasting, and it's people who drink a lot of wine like Psalms would say, this is a tough one. I can't tell you what it's going to taste like until I get in there. Okay, and so lastly, we've talked about the way it looks, we talked about the way it smells, and now we're tasting. So what do you get what's the first thing? Are you getting fruit forward?
I am getting fruit forward, but it's not so much fruit forward in the front of the mouth. It's a fruit forward in the back. I'm not really getting a whole lot of flavor in the front, but I'm getting all of that in the, not really the back, but in the middle of the mouth.
Yeah. This wine reminds me, do you like sour beer?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
this kind of
does.
reminds me of a sour.
Yes.
Which is crazy,
yes, so
because the fermentation process is so different, but also they're adding fruits to those sour beers and stuff.
You're
and this
so
is
right.
that to me. It's super, super ripe strawberry. you know, but not another descriptor with fruit forward wines like this one, but it's not sweet at all. It's dry wine with effervescence, which is just like a really cool combination, those two qualities in a wine. But yeah, I'm such a big fan of this one.
Yeah, me too. I really like this wine a lot. Thank you so much for bringing this to us. But it's because it's talking about like the sweet versus, you know, because it's very fruity. It's a very fruity wine, but it's light. So it's not like heavy like a sweeter wine. Like it's very it's light. It gives you like it's light notes. It really just kind of fills your mouth as opposed to like, you know, weighing it down almost, like, which is kind of how whenever I drink sweeter wines, that's how I feel. Is I feel like it's weighing down in my mouth, and this is just very much so fills and just like you know, comes open, like opens up inside and with all the fruit flavors.
It definitely has a good crescendo as far as like after you drink it, like it doesn't just immediately disappear the taste. Yeah. Like it's got a beautiful build, and they did a really good job with this one. And I can't imagine like I have never tried any cheese pairings with this wine, but like immediately, like I just want to get a blue cheese or camembert. Like that's it. That's where my head goes. I just know it would just take all of those like fun strawberry flavors and shoot them to the moon.
Right. No, we're gonna have to do like fold in some charcuterie boards in this podcast, because every time I have one of these wines, I'm like,
no, next time I'm gonna be like, and if you have a chance, get some blue cheese.
Okay, good to know. We need to do those pairings for sure. That's the extra layer to this. Okay, so Amanda, so we left out on the back before the break. We're about to introduce a whole new character into this story. I think that really comes out of left field and just really opens this thing up. Are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right, excellent. Well, we are jumping forward now to 2008. So this is almost 20 years after Jacob Wetterling went missing. And that's when a psychiatrist came forward to federal investigators saying that one of their clients confessed to murdering 2 young boys in 1958. That client's name was 62-year-old Vernon Seitz. He was from the area, but did indeed admit to his psychiatrist confidentially that he murdered 2 boys 50 years ago. Vernon had just died in his home in Milwaukee of natural causes. And so when investigators got the chance to search his home after he died, they found some really disturbing stuff, including child pornography, bondage devices, books on cannibalism, newspaper clippings about missing children, and a laminated missing person poster from Jacob Wetterling. And when police clued Jacob's parents into the latest news about the investigation, investigators showed them a picture of Vernon, and Jacob's mom recognizes him right away. She says that Vernon had come to visit her at least twice after Jacob's disappearance, wanting to talk to her about Jacob. But by this point, she was too frazzled, and there were dozens of people coming to her wanting to talk to her about her son. So it didn't really stand out until she was sitting at a table nearly 20 years later with a picture of that same man right in front of her.
Oh my goodness. First of all, his name's Vernon. I hate that name. It's giving Venom or like Voldemort. So what did they do about that?
Well, police did compare everything that they could about Vernon forensically, Amanda, but didn't find anything physical that linked him to Jacob's case. So they just kind of like let that tip go.
Really?
Yeah. Which, again, like, he's dead, so, like, there's nothing you can really do about it, but he's, like, straight up admitting to murdering young children. It just seems like we should confirm that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it seems like an important detail.
Yeah. Which, like, I don't know, like, at this point, too, like, I always keep in mind, well, this is 2008, so, like, maybe not as much, but, like, specifically in the late 80s, early 90s, like, there was so much, because, like, the internet didn't exist, like, technology wasn't really all that advanced, and so all these, like, distinct agencies, like, really worked completely independent of each other. Like, they didn't really communicate all that much. Like, they did when they had to, but not, like, voluntarily, like we think about today, like, where you can just, like, log into a database and, like, have all this information.
Exactly.
Not really the case back then, so maybe that was part of it.
This is, like, out of left field, but have you watched the new conspiracy theories, Octopus?
No, but I just added it to my Netflix last night.
I'm like almost to episode 3. Please text me.
Okay, I will.
Yeah, because it's a very, very interesting, like when databases were introduced to the police systems, and it's and they didn't have that. That's exactly the case with this case in particular.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so and like there's also like a certain level of pride over it too. Like I've noticed a lot of times like this is a very prideful community, the law enforcement community. And so
Yes.
like
Yes.
big egos, to be clear. And so it seems to me as though like it could be one of those situations as well where it's just like, you know, this is my case, not your case, this is my case. And so like that, like, and again, I don't know for sure if that's what's happening, but like sometimes that is what happens, that they're just like, you
Yeah.
know, not to say they're just gonna like let a murderer go, but like not give it as much attention if it's like somebody else's thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, the glimmer of hope, you know, felt like everything that they were hoping for. And although it turned into just another dead end, it did reignite some interest in the case. Around the same time, a blogger of all people by the name of Joy Baker started to dig into Jacob's disappearance again. And in the process, she came across those Painesville assaults that we mentioned earlier. Well, she somehow got connected with Jared to talk through what she had learned and then started writing about Jacob's disappearance. And because of this, you know, sudden renewed interest, the FBI agreed to officially reopen Jacob's case and agreed to look at Jared's assault again, too. The FBI opened a cold case review of the way Jacob and Jared's cases had been handled. It basically simultaneously gave them an excuse to look at the case files with a fresh set of eyes while also having the added benefit of analyzing what may have gone wrong in an official capacity. And by 2014, after years of running down new leads and cracking open pages that hadn't been turned in more than 2 decades, an investigator notices something that could bring them down a new path. And the more that investigator digs, the more they realize that there could really truly be something there that finally cracks this case. Crime Over Wine is proud to support Emancipet. Today, there are over 60 million beloved pets across the country whose families cannot access or afford veterinary care. With your help, Emancipet is changing that. Emancipet is a nonprofit that offers low-cost vet care for those who need it most. They rely on donations to keep their costs low for pet families across the country. You can support Emancipet's mission at emancipet.org. Investigators found a hair that was on the wrists of the sweatshirt Jared was wearing the night that he was attacked in January of 1989. And in 2014, the DNA technology that they had access to was, needless to say, much stronger than the technology they had back in the 80s and 90s, so they decided to test it again. And it turned out to be a total match to a hair they already had in their system. It was the hair that police had collected from Danny Heinrich back in 1989.
Not my boy Danny. I really just felt like he didn't do it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so Danny's still around these 2 decades later, so they finally get him. They finally arrest him, right?
Well, unfortunately, Amanda, the statute of limitations on Jared's attack had run out by 2015. But it did give investigators an excuse to get a search warrant, and they did. They searched Danny Heinrich's property, the same one he had lived in at, more than 20 years prior, and they found handcuffs, duct tape, camouflage pants, and a shirt, and 4 bins filled with boys-size athletic wear,
Oh, no.
plus newspaper clippings of articles on Jacob's disappearance, and 19 binders of child pornography. Not even including the, quote, numerous videotapes of what appear to be surreptitiously recorded footage of neighborhood children delivering newspapers, riding bicycles, playing in public playgrounds, and participating in sports activities. And so, although they couldn't arrest Danny with Jared's assaults, they do arrest him on child pornography charges in October of 2015.
Wow. Okay, so I have a question. The statute, this is like a legal jargon kind of question. Mm-hmm. So the statute of limitations,
yes.
And that being, it had ran out by 2015, and so they ended up getting him on child pornography. So what does the statute of limitations exactly mean, and what's the timeline on that? And
yes. Great question.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you asked. And so basically statute of limitations means that like you can't go, like you can only make an arrest or bring charges against someone a certain amount of time after a crime has been committed.
Oh
And
my
it's like a certain
gosh.
it's a in place to protect,
Innocent
suspects'
people.
rights. Yeah,
Yeah,
innocent
innocent
people, suspect
suspects.
rights.
Yeah. But
Sure,
gosh, it's like
absolutely.
a criminal doesn't expire.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's there for sure, and it's like it's there are like again, it can be debated about how legit this is or not, and like there are certain crimes that there are no statute of limitations on, but there are, and like obviously much more intense crimes there are much longer statute of limitations, and like like more petty crimes have much shorter statute of
Okay,
limitations. So
wow. See, and
yeah.
I didn't know that. And so, like, is that something that a judge or the police department who decides the time for?
So it depends on your state and depends on the crime, unfortunately. So, like Tennessee may have a statute of limitations for a sexual assault that's, a certain amount of time, but like New York may have one that's like much longer.
Yeah.
It really just depends on the state. But like to be clear, like if they even tried to bring charges against someone once the statute of limitations run out, like that is thrown away right away.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't even get like much of a hearing.
You are so educated on this stuff. It's just crazy I'm immediately pulling that because I'm like, I know this is when DNA was the game changer.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this was like when they were like getting people left and right because all of a sudden this technology was coming back. Yeah, no, for sure. But, when they took Danny in, police pressed him over and over and over again. And now they finally had this man in their grasp after decades of trying to prove that he or someone else had something to do with Jacob's disappearance and likely Jacob's murder, as they were presuming by this point. And after hours of questioning, Danny broke down. He admitted to kidnapping, molesting, and killing Jacob Wetterling. He said he was out for a drive when he saw the three boys on their bikes that October evening and decided he wanted to take one of them. And he said he pulled over next to that driveway where the tracks were found, got out, grabbed Jacob, drove him to a remote spot, assaulted him, and then panicked and shot him twice. After he killed Jacob, he used a Bobcat construction vehicle he found at a nearby construction site to dig a hole and to bury him. About a year later, he said, he returned to the site where he buried Jacob and noticed that the grave was becoming a little bit more noticeable, and so he moved his body to a nearby farm not far from where he lived.
Okay, Mr. Criminal. Burials are for, like, spirituality. Like, if you're burying somebody as a criminal, it's not even... It's so morally messed up to me. I'm like, you better do it. Yeah, at least do your crime right. So this guy obviously is just insane.
Yeah.
Then he tampers with the body and moves the burial site.
Yeah.
If we can even call it a burial, the buried site.
Sure. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
To a nearby farm.
Well, and again, it's just like, and it's like a little bit of, because a lot of times, and like I don't know nearly enough about the psychology to be able to like speak on this intelligently, but like so I'm really kind of like generalizing here.
Yeah.
But point being is like, so like a lot of times these guys like kind of get off a little bit on like the risk of it all, and so like that almost makes me think that may have played a part in that
and
too.
also like now we're hearing like that he was returning to the site.
Right.
And that's like that's either guilt or like we're talking about some real like deep psychological issues with this guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. But police ended up approaching Jacob's mother with Danny's confession and told her that they wanted to offer Danny a deal, but they needed her to sign off on the whole thing. Investigators said that they were going to offer that they don't pursue murder charges against Danny for Jacob's murder and would only charge him with child pornography charges if Danny showed them where he buried Jacob. Jacob's mother agreed, and so did Danny. He brought investigators to that farm just outside of Painesville and not far from where Danny lived, and he watched as they dug up bones, teeth, and a t-shirt that said Wetterling on the back, plus a red St. Cloud hockey jacket, which is exactly what Jacob was wearing the night that he disappeared.
Oh my gosh. The parents agreed?
Yeah. I don't know if that's what I would do, but also to be fair from their perspective, like, first of all, I can only imagine 25 years later, like you're just looking for closure. You're just looking for this all to be over. You're just looking to know exactly what happened to him, exactly where he went, et cetera, et cetera. And so from that perspective, I could see why they wanted to do it. And then also too, I just don't think they really had that strong of a case, frankly, against Danny without the body or without
they're tricking him.
I mean, kind of. I mean, but not really, because they didn't end up charging him at all with anything that he just admitted to.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like they only got him on the child pornography charges, and I mean, sure, they could have built something against Danny, but they didn't really have anything. They really didn't have anything. Specifically, if you didn't have any part of Danny's body to compare the DNA to, or whatever, to get more physical evidence, you didn't have that. And if Danny's I'm not telling you anything unless you drop the charges, what other choice do you have? And frankly, this guy's gonna be in jail for the rest of his life anyways, right? Because child porn charges the maximum that will take you right up until the end of your life anyways, considering how old he was.
I actually didn't know that it's almost like murder as far as the way that it's charged. So thank you for saying that, because I'm why would the parents, because I'm sure law enforcement was listen, we got this guy, don't worry,
right,
we're gonna
right.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to go about it, but
I don't know if I agree with it. I would have maybe lessened it to a lesser murder charge, but do you? I don't know. Again, she was fine with it, so I give it that much credit, but I guess
they just want their son's body.
Exactly. They want
closure.
This to be over. Yeah. This to be over. So, on September 6, 2016, Danny confessed under oath to Jacob's murder and also confessed to Jared Shiles' sexual assault. But remember, the statute of limitations had ran out there, so he was never charged with Jared's assault. And although he was largely considered a suspect in the 8 Painesville assaults, he was never charged in those either, and also never made a confession to that. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison on those child pornography charges.
20 years?
Yeah.
That's not enough.
I mean, it doesn't feel like enough. I have to imagine that's the maximum.
Yeah.
But, I mean, again, it just makes me think that, you should have gotten him on something with the murder charge, but, I don't know. Again, I also, not to backseat quarterback this thing, but, it just feels like they, it feels like they, I don't know, it just feels like they could have had something, but maybe they just truly didn't. Maybe they just truly, this is the best we can do.
It's also, over such a long period of time, you feel like the hamster on the wheel, and
That's
it's
fair.
just gosh, when are we getting off of this wheel? And
right, well, yeah, and it's also, a totally new set of investigators, I'm sure of that.
These aren't
right?
people that were, had their hearts, in it in the beginning.
Right, so true. But, and it's a bit of a surprising move, too, Amanda, talking about, the current law enforcement scene. In 2018, the local sheriff's office reveals publicly a report that details the findings of a task force assigned to investigate the investigation into Jacob Wetterling's disappearance. And flat out, the sheriff says that police originally botched this whole thing, saying they had, quote, wasted time chasing far-flung leads and listening to psychics rather than tracking down compelling evidence close to home. In the report, which was 41,787 pages in all, holy crap, the sheriff said investigators didn't thoroughly canvass the neighborhood originally and failed to connect Jacob's case to other similar crimes in the area, despite there being a ton of evidence to do that. He also said that for years, investigators pursued the neighbor, who, again, we're not naming, despite there being, absolutely zero evidence that he had anything to do with Jacob's disappearance. They were on him, though, even then, still. And on top of that, the report said that police received a tip less than 48 hours after Jacob Wetterling's disappearance from a boy who'd been attacked by a man in Painesville in a similar manner. But investigators didn't follow up that lead for almost 3 months. Plus, Danny Heinrich's name came up a lot in this investigation, even after police had arrested him and released him after Jared couldn't pick him out in a lineup. Another sex offender in the area had implicated Danny with new information on Jacob's abduction in March of 1991, but he was never questioned after that. Even he'd already been questioned twice before. Plus, the report says that in his initial questioning, Danny failed a polygraph test when being asked about Jared and Jacob's cases. Look, I hate polygraphs. I don't buy them for shit, but back then they were absolutely everything. And here's a guy who flat out failed.
Yeah, people genuinely, I think back then, believed polygraphs were more accurate than we believe now. And it sounds like this new group of law enforcement that were able to get to the bottom and crack it on on Danny, that they really cared about going back and kind of like exposing the original crew who was a part of this investigation. And like they're poking all the holes in like their process, and like this is where they went wrong. And it sounds like it's a productive way, honestly, to go about it, because like they don't want to make the same mistakes. Like that's the thing with like, you know, I appreciate that, I guess, with the law enforcement doing that. Because I mean, how are we going to get better if we don't know what didn't work the first time.
Right. Well, and it would have been so easy for them to just be like, yeah, no, like, you know, cool, and like moved on, right? Because it's not their problem, right? Like it's you know, most of these guys, you know, were kids when this investigation even started. So like it's really not their problem. But respect to the point of like, because a lot of times they like investigators mess up and like we're screaming into our microphones saying how messy this investigation is, and no one ever admits it. And like a lot of times they'll double down on it, and we're just like, what the heck are you talking about? And so respect to them, because like we never really see this really like very often of like, you know, of going back and acknowledging your mistakes and like your you know, predecessors' mistakes, and like talking about how you could have done differently. And it's kind of interesting. Again, we're gonna link to this story in our show notes and on our website too, but there's also this kind of like odd, you know, like dynamic here where like the sheriff gets up and like makes this like scathing report, and then an FBI investigator gets up there and kind of like rebukes him a little bit and like says like no, like, you know, like he went a little bit too far, like in the same press conference. And so it's kind of like there's like some weird dynamics there. And so point being is I'm sure there was like a lot of pressure on the sheriff to like, you know, to not say what he did, and he did it anyways. And so respect there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It sounds like we both were like, that's kind of, I guess, the thing about this case in particular that this stands out to me. The last two cases that we've done, because you know, I'm a third timer and I've got a jacket. I think there's a lesson learned here, and I actually really appreciate the way that the 2018 group of law enforcement went about this.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah, respect it.
Well, I do always like to end these kinds of cases with something kind of like remotely good, if there is anything good here. Despite the horror that Jacob's parents went through in trying to bring their son home and his abductor to justice, the Wetterlings did what they could to bring some light from this whole situation. As I said, they founded the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, which does great work around preventing child abductions and advocating for victims' family members. But just a few years after Jacob's disappearance, Jacob's mom became one of the founding board members of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, which does the Lord's work, as far as I'm concerned, in advocating for children and bringing light to some of the most horrific crimes imaginable. Jacob's mom also advocated for the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children and Sexually Violent Offender Registration Act of 1994, which requires any person convicted of a criminal offense against a minor or who is convicted of a sexually violent felony to register with police for 10 years after they are released from prison.
You know what? Jacob's mom, goodness.
Yeah.
Like,
badass.
God bless her.
Yeah,
you know,
seriously.
I feel like I can't even imagine, like, perspective I can't imagine being the mother of the victim in this story. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like she really did the decision she made with the cards she was dealt. Like, it sounds like she did the best she could to make sure that things like this don't happen again, or that it's just harder for it to happen.
Yeah, well, and like, again, like, keep like putting this all in context here, like, we're talking about this at the end of this story, but all this was happening, like this law, this, you know, her joining the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, like her you know, starting the foundation, all happened within like a year or two, or you know, up to 5 years after Jacob's disappearance. And so like all of this is like happening while she's very much so like basically a grieving mom in all this situation. Like, she's still fighting for this. And then also like that national law, the Jacob Wetterling law, you know, just like it like puts it into perspective for me of that, like today it's like, yeah, like obviously like you're a sex offender or you register with police, and it just like puts it into perspective for me that like that wasn't always the case, you know, and like that this was, you know, somebody who you know, Jacob was the person who made this happen, right? Like even though he like wasn't around to see it all happen. Like he you know, his life,
his name, his legacy lives
right.
like on in a very positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in an impactful
And here
way.
we are talking about him.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There you go. Love that. Drinking wine, talking about Jacob. Appreciate, like, that's incredible as far as I'm concerned. So
that's a good note to end it on.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, talking about notes and stuff. Yeah, well, Amanda, that is all that we have for you this week. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been great having you to impart your wine wisdom on us. So
oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I've genuinely enjoyed these. Like this story in particular, I feel like I really liked the way that you found a positive at the end.
Yeah.
The other ones that we've done in live are like very much like these are drama.
Yeah.
This one is like, here's how things,
yeah,
you know, how to take a horrible situation and bring good out of it. So kudos to you for finding this one.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, tell everyone where they can find you and your amazing restaurant online if they would like to.
So, yeah, I got a 4.9 on Google. It's called Amada Tapas and Wine. We're located at 1413 Chestnut Street, downtown Southside Chattanooga. And, yeah, we're a tapas restaurant, so that is an emphasis on the tapas and not a topless restaurant, which people think I'm saying that all the time.
Dear God.
And yeah, we've got a bunch of Spanish wines, other wines from around the world as well. And we do small plates. Menus comprised of about 25 small plates. We're on Instagram and Facebook at Amada Tapas. And my name's Amanda Trotter, and I was very, very happy to be a part of this.
Excellent. Well, your food is absolutely incredible, as I will never find an opportunity not to tell you. But thank you again so much for coming on, Amanda, and thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. And if you were just loving this podcast and are just looking for a way to tell everyone and anyone about it, the best way to help people discover this podcast is by leaving us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you are listening right now. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're wondering what we have in store for you next week, here's a quick sneak peek. Hello, everyone. It's Liam.
And I'm Amanda Denise, host of Code and Untold. I am joining the Crime Vineyard this week with the case of a missing young girl from North Carolina and the investigators' tireless mission to find her. How close are we to finding out what happened to Aisha Degree?
Closer than you may think, Amanda. We will tell you all about it and how you can help next Wine Wednesday on another episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.